Hello and welcome to month one of our 2023 $5 quilt club. So I will be showing you how to sew this block with foundation paper piecing. Okay, so these are the fabrics that you got in your kit. If you want to make your supplemental block, you know, challenge yourself, do both methods, see which one you like better. You can purchase these fabrics to look like this, or you can get the fabrics for these blocks in the setting kit, and they will be available for pre-order in October. So first step will be to print out your foundation paper piecing sheets. So when you print them out, they will look like this. So there will be 4 sheets. It says month 1. These ones are whole pieces, your little square, oh, you can't see it, square and a square. And then this one you're going to have to seam together with tape. So I'm going to grab my non-existent masking tape and show you exactly how I do that. So here is my C piece. And what I want to do is cut off the seam right there on that one. So I am going to use a ruler and make sure that when I cut this, it's a really nice straight line. So if you have a second rotary cutter with a paper blade, you know, that would be perfect. It will just dull your blade a lot when you use a rotary cutter. You can use scissors. I've just always found that it's a little bit more accurate to get let me see if I can position this a little bit better. To get a super straight line if you use a rotary cutter and a ruler. So I'm going to position the ruler exactly on that dotted line right on the edge and get that to be nice and straight. So that's when I'm going to, so I cut it off 1, and then I'm going to line that up ever so perfectly right here all the way across there. So that is where I'm going to tape it. And my masking tape, I like to use paper tape. Scotch tape, it just seems like it's a little too sticky, but it is very nice and clear. So that is where you're going to tape that. And I don't see mine real quick. I don't know where it is. It's always in here. And it's not in my drawer. So apologize about that. Just give me a second and I will locate that. So you're going to do that for both your C and your E piece. So you're going to cut them out like that. So you're just going to trim off one side, either side, just not both of them, whichever one you want. And then you're going to tape those together, and then you're going to cut out all of your pieces. Do not cut directly on the lines. I always leave a tad bit around the edges. Let me grab some scissors. So what I mean by leaving a little bit of space is you are going to cut and just leave, you know, 1/4 of an inch around all of the pieces so that they're just a little bit bigger, because it's so much easier to trim. We can't make fabric appear when it's too short, but we can always trim it down. So when you cut them out, just make them a tad bit bigger, just like that. So that is what you're going to do to prep your foundation paper piecing. So I have this, you know, this is my finished block that I have, and you can see how I have used masking tape. I do tape on both sides to make sure that it's not shifting at all, because that is just no fun when it does. So once you do have these all cut out, if you want, you can, for a little bit ease, you can cut out the the templates that are for the traditional piece block. So this is the traditional piece page. You can cut those out so that you have a little bit of a guideline of how large to cut your pieces for this foundation paper piecing. Okay, so when you cut things out, you're always going to want to try to cut larger than this whole piece that's E. So we're just going to use E2 as an example, plus 1/4 of an inch. So fortunately, this one is already that. So this is already perfectly 1/4 of an inch around the entire thing. So most paper piecing patterns will not have this template guide of what size to cut them to. You just want it larger than that. So for fun, you can just fold it directly in half. You can use cardstock to get a real nice, perfect fold line, or you can eyeball it like I'm doing it. And you're going to line that up on your fabric and make sure that you have a 1/4 of an inch past the fold line. So you can use an add a 1/4 ruler, which is so fantastically helpful. Of course, it's never where I want it to be. So I'm just going to show you on a traditional ruler for fun. So you are going to put your 1/4 of inch line on the edge. So just as long as it's larger, it's okay to be way larger. So like this is like, you know, a whole 1/2 inch larger. Perfect. The biggest problem with foundation paper piecing is we cut pieces that are too small. Be generous. It's so easy. So you got a 2-inch piece in your kit, and this piece only really needs to be, what is that, 1 1/4 inches. So it is, you know, it's totally fine. So you can use that as a guideline to see how long you need your pieces to be, but you will need 4 for each. So here I have all 4. I'm doing this in a different colorway, so please bear with me on that. I already made them, so this is my second time doing it. I didn't want to use the same fabrics again. So please bear with me and forgive me for not having the same fabric. So right here I've got 4 layers, and really all I'm looking for is to make sure that that's larger. So I'm like, okay, bam, okay, that's larger. That's my B of my one fabric. And then I also need it of the next fabric. So I see that this has a fold in there and this is a little wrinkly. So I'm going to go spray that with spray starch and iron it real quick. I use flatter. I love the way this stuff smells. And it allows your fabric to get very, very crisp, and it prevents stretching. So if you want to be piecing accurately, spray starch is your best friend. So there, that looks a lot better, right? So I'm just going to line up all 4 layers and make sure that when I use my template here, that it is larger on all sides, okay? So that's good enough. There we go. Now my E pieces, so E and D, they are all set up to go. And then also you are going to need that for, here is our A block. You should got a 2-inch square, which definitely by far covers up this entire area of A1, and you should be good on that. So you shouldn't have to trim that one down anymore. For your A2 pieces, you can use the template, or what you can do is, I'm just going to really roughly cut this out so I can show you. Try not to cut anything on your table when you put paper over the top, because that has happened to me. Okay, so here I have some scraps. I want 4 of these triangles. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it in half. I'm going to fold it in half again and make sure that when I look at this, when you fold this down, that is larger on all sides. So that looks pretty good to me. This is the beauty of paper piecing, is that you do not have to worry about accuracy when you are cutting for just doing the general cutting. So I have to cut that fold there. So I'm just going to grab a pair of scissors and cut that. So now I have 4 black triangles that are exceedingly large compared to my A3. And that's what we want. We want them much, much larger. So here are my 4 A triangles. I have 4 of each of the colors to go all the way around my block so that you can see, right, 4 of each color. You have your contrasting one in the middle, your 4, in this case, they're A's, and then this big background one on your paper piecing templates are either B4, B1, C1, C4. So you're going to want to have those larger than your pieces as well. So you can use the templates like we have for the foundation, I'm sorry, not foundation, traditional piecing, or you can, real quick, there, okay, so I cut that out, and then I'm going to fold directly on that line so that I can see that all of my black pieces are going to be larger by a 1/4 inch on all sides. This top one is really tight, but these other ones, they're a lot bigger, and that is totally fine. So you will have enough fabric to get 4 black squares for your corners here in your kit. So if you find out that you are missing some fabric and you cut it wrong, it's just Kona black. Super, super easy fabric to find. Okay, so to get started, we have all of these. I'm going to steal the tape off of this because I cannot find my masking tape. So give me 1 second here. See if that works. What did I do with this one C, and I cut out the other C to make sure that it goes on top. Okay, and I'm just going to tape that into place and then cut it out. So line it up real nice. That way it's all in one video. So tape it all. I don't know. I've never really reused masking tape, but I'm going to try to peel this off nice and slow, a little bit. No, that's not so much. And tape that across so that it stays enough for me to get this stitching. So use real tape. Don't do that. All right, I'm gonna move all this stuff out of the way and really quickly chop this out so you can see what I'm doing. Okay, so I'm gonna cut that out. So I have the C and the B template are the same. It's not gonna be hard to put those together. Okay, so they're gonna be the same. Okay, so here we go. I have my poorly pieced C. And the first, so we're going to do these in order. So we're going to start with C1, then we're going to go to C2, C3, and C4. So some pieces are interchangeable, but for the sake of everybody learning how to paper piecing, please stick to the numbers that are written on the pattern. Okay, so in order to make sure that we have the right fabric placement, it is really, really good to just lay out your block how you want it done, right? So in this, in the kit, you get 2 different greens. So I'm going to, and you can notice that on the corners, the greens are not touching each other. So you're going to make sure that you get an alternating layout. So I'm going to lay out, I probably moved all my pieces that I cut, my greens so that I get a good alternating layout. And again, your pieces are larger, and that is awesome. Here is my green that goes in the center. Here's my 4 triangles. And then my black squares, which I must have shoved to the side, are all going to go on the side. So here is my cool block, right? Looks so good. There, now I have my fabric laid out. So now when you put your templates over, you can see which fabric goes where. So you want to make sure that you get the right layout of which greens go where. So I can see that C1, in this case, I'm doing light green right there. So, but, in my finished block over here, I put the cheetah print right there. So, but again, this is going to be flipped over. And it's going to be in mirror image. So what you put on the bottom here, you're going to flip it over and then it's going to be on the other side. Okay, so you can do either way, it doesn't really matter. So glue sticks work really, really well in this case. So you just want to position the first fabric right down on the top. So you want wrong sides together. So you want the wrong side of the paper and the wrong side of the fabric together, and then you're going to pin or glue it into place. So that is how you position that. Then you're going to check to make sure if you fold the paper on this line, that you have at least 1/4 inch on that side. And then if you fold the paper over here, you have at least 1/4 inch on that side. And that is how you know that you have enough fabric to cover C1. So for C2, this is where having a ruler or a piece of cardstock. Here's my sew straight. My sew straight that works out really, really nicely as like a piece of cardstock. I can fold between C1 and C2, and I can just easily fold over the paper. In this case, the fabric too. But Ideally, you would do it on this side, but I put my pin down, so now it's in the way, right? So you can move your pin, fold your paper on that cardstock. You can get a real nice crisp line. Oops. And then I'm going to repin that. So now, okay, so now we have our first piece prepped. If you have an add a quarter ruler, this is the great time to use that ledge that's on there to trim your fabric on this side to make sure that there's only a 1/4 of an inch here. So I'm going to grab my ruler. Yes. I love Quilter Select. They don't slide. They are the best rulers to ever use. And I'm going to line it up with the 1/4 of an inch here. So, and I'm going to just trim, since I have a pin, it's a little teeter-tottery. Oops. It's very teeter-tottery, so it didn't come out very straight. So glue is definitely better when it comes to that. So now that I have a perfect 1/4 of an inch along this edge, I can grab my black piece and line that up. Now, solids don't have a right or wrong side, but whenever we sew, we always put right sides together. Open your project. Make sure that you have both right sides together. Fold it back down. You can pin this. You can use Wonder Clips to keep this in place. I just like to hold it. So when you start to sew on foundation paper piecing, you are going to make sure that your sewing machine is at, I like to sew at 1.5. That way, when I need to remove the paper, it's just going to tear right out. So if you have a large seam allowance, or sorry, a large stitch length, it's not going to just pull like this, right? We want it to just so easily pulls right out, does no damage to our stitching at all. Okay, sometimes you get little bits of paper in there, and you can use tweezers or, you know, a little bit of force and it will just come right out. But you want the paper to be able to be removed. So that is why we stitch at a very small stitch length. Because I moved everything around, I'm going to make sure that that stayed into place. Just check that real quick before I sew. The final check before is once this is folded back, if I look on all edges of my upside down paper, I can see that this black covers on all sides. All sides. It is hanging out, which is what we want. So now I'm going to flip that back over, go right over to my sewing machine, and I'm going to start stitching into the seam allowance well before I get to that seam allowance. So I'm going to start stitching and I'm going to stitch right on that line. I'm going to move my pin so it doesn't affect my stitching, and I'm going to go all the way across. All the way across. So when I'm stitching, I'm going to make sure that that gets all the way through my seam allowance. I was a little crooked there, but I'm going to chop that off anyway, right? So all the way through the seam allowance. That's where you're going to sew. You can then you can press your seams open. Whenever you're doing foundation paper piecing, you're going to want to make sure that you press all the way open. So you don't want to be pressing so that it's like this. You will not get nice straight points. You want to make sure that that is pulled as far back as it can without really doing any too much stretching to the fabric. So this is the point in which you can use a seam roller, and you can just roll that along your seam to make sure that it is nice and flat. And these are great for when you're traveling or if your sewing station is further away from your ironing station. So I prefer a hot iron, so I'm going to take that over there and just give it a hot zap. This is my favorite iron. I use the Oliso Mini every day. So anyway, so that is our first stitch there. And now, so we have C1 and C2 done. So now we're going to move on to C3. So take your piece of cardstock, piece of paper, whatever you got. And now I'm going to fold that right on the line and fold the paper. And now once that's folded, I can cut my extra and get just, I'll move my other fabric out of the way. I want just a 1/4 of an inch over there. So if you have an add a quarter ruler, it has a little edge and it sticks right up against that folded paper and makes it just so easy, no brainer. You can just slice it and you don't have to worry about it lining up because it lines up really, really perfectly. So there we go. I cut that off right there. So now I have just a nice, perfect 1/4 of an inch. And now my C3 fabric is my darker green. I'm going to line that directly up with the previous one. I'm going to hold that in place. And now I can kind of see my line that's over here, and I can make sure that this fabric covers this area that I'm trying to cover. So light boxes are really, really good. You can hold it up to a window. I have this little extendo light that comes out on my sewing machine that is right here. You can kind of see that a little bit. And it will allow me to hold it up to that to make sure that this space is all covered once it's flipped over. So now again, I'm going to start stitching into the seam allowance and stitch all the way across. So I'm going to stitch straight. Sorry, my dogs are playing in the background. Dink. Sorry, that is my dog, Dink, and he's playing with his friend. Okay, so now once that is done, you're going to iron your piece down or use your seam roller to make sure that that is nice and tight. So you do not want to be folding it down so that there's a fold. You want to pull it all the way back as you can without stretching your fabric too much. So you don't want to see, you don't want to see all those stitches. So you can use your seam roller and stitch, press it down nice and hard so that it gets nice and flat. So that is that one. And now the next thing, we're going to do the exact same thing again. We're going to use our straight edge, line it up along that folding line right there, or a stitching line. We're going to press the paper, and now we're going to trim our fabric so that it is a perfect 1/4 of an inch from the edge. So there we go. Make sure I'm not cutting my next piece of fabric. Okay, now that since that is done there, I'm going to take my next piece and line that up with that. And if you cut these perfectly with a straight edge, it makes it really easy to line up because that way you know that it's going to have enough fabric. So I'm kind of worried about this edge here, so I'm going to lift up my fabric, my paper here, and see whether or not that actually covers that area. So it looks like it's a little short, so I'm just going to shift it up a little bit to make sure that when I open this, I'm going to have enough fabric